Hello, everyone. Welcome to Or This. This is my Monday morning quarterbacking of my sermon and scriptures and theme for the previous Sunday. And this video is for Sunday, June 6th. You can see the scripture references that we used this past weekend in the description of this video. And my sermon for this past weekend hit on both the Gospel from Mark and also the Old Testament reading from Genesis chapter 3. But today I want to talk about this part of the passage from Mark where Jesus uses some imagery to respond to the scribes, who are religious leaders, who are basically looking at what Jesus is doing and saying that what he is doing is of the devil or of Satan or of it is evil. Basically, it is basically of something that is completely opposite of God. What they say specifically is he has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons. And this is because Jesus has these crowds of people in his hometown coming to him to be healed and to have unclean spirits driven out, to be basically given a whole new life that is not fraught with the illness or fraught with the turmoil that they've experienced from their psychological or spiritual or physical ailments throughout their lives. Now, of course, we would all think that people being freed of their ailments and of those things that torment them would be a good thing, but not these religious leaders. And so they see what Jesus is doing, and for whatever reason, they believe maybe that Jesus doesn't deserve to be able to be doing these things or shouldn't have the authority to do these things, or they don't like that Jesus is freeing all of these people that they never really took the time to worry about before. And now these people are going to be free in life from their ailments to focus on the other areas of their lives that they weren't able to, and didn't have the energy for before. Whatever it was, these religious leaders didn't like it. And what I would like to talk about is Jesus uses some imagery to respond to this charge. Because if you really think about it, I mean, this is pretty bad. If you look, if we all know who Jesus is and we all see what Jesus is doing, and then you hear religious leaders who are supposed to be the people who help the common people understand who God is and to facilitate God's relationship with them, the God who created them, to continue to facilitate that relationship. They're seeing good things happen in people's lives, and they're saying that Jesus is doing this by the power of something opposed to God is really, really bad. And so Jesus starts addressing this with some little images. And one of the images that Jesus uses is, if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. If a house is divided, if there's division, then it will not be able to stand. You know, that word division seems to be on a lot of our minds, and we seem to see a lot of division happening in our society today. And I've heard a lot of people say, we are more divided than we ever have been in this country. Or, there's so much division, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I've heard a lot of people say these things. And it's true that there certainly seems to be a lot of division. And now let's remember that division is different from diversity, because they have a little bit of a connection in that you're going to have people who have different viewpoints, different ideas about things, different backgrounds and understandings of life. The difference is the diversity is kind of just naming the fact that there are differing viewpoints and differing perspectives. Division is when those differences actually come between people and actually separate us from one another, and make us either not trust one another, make us think that about each other, that we're not good people, that we don't have anything in common, and almost can even lead us to a point where we forget the fact that we were all made in God's image. We were all saved by Jesus on the cross. That we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and we really do have all these commonalities as human beings. But instead, division can not only separate us from one another, but it gets us focused on things that maybe aren't true or that aren't important. When instead of focusing on things that are important and things that need to be focused on. And that's what Jesus is saying. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And he's kind of using this example to show the religious leaders why he can't be doing Satan's work, because Satan's work is to destroy people's lives, but Jesus' actions are trying to restore people's lives. So how would it work out? How would Satan want to be the destroyer of life and yet make people have restored life? That doesn't make sense. And so this is what Jesus, to divide. I know there's a saying called divide and conquer, but that's usually when you're trying to take out the competition. So Satan would not be about one thing and then do a whole different thing. And be able to fulfill Satan's purposes. So how in the world would it make any sense that doing something good for people's lives would actually fulfill Satan's purposes? Makes absolutely no sense. And Jesus is right, is that you can't fulfill a goal, you can't fulfill your purposes if there's division. Because the division itself then becomes the focus, and it gets in the way, and all of a sudden the focus that's important goes to the wayside in favor of focusing on that which divides and creates even more division. What's interesting, though, then in later on in this passage. So obviously the example, Jesus is saying even Satan, doing one thing and then doing a completely different thing won't fulfill his purposes. So how in the world does your statement make any sense? But of course, Jesus is there to fulfill God's purposes. And so so he talks about division being counterproductive. Later on in this passage, Jesus' family is also part of the mix here, and they're not really certain of what Jesus is doing, and they know him personally, so they kind of think he's a little bit out of his mind in thinking that he should be doing this kind of thing. But it says at the end of the passage, Jesus is looking for, or his family's looking for him, and Jesus says, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." And he's talking about the crowds that are gathered with him for his teaching and for his healing and everything. And in a way, the passage ends with unity rather than division. In Jesus talking about anybody who is seeking to understand God's ways through Jesus' teachings, anybody who's coming to Jesus for healing, anybody who recognizes Jesus as an important part of our lives, because of Jesus bringing God's mercy and God's reign into the world, are connected, are unified into one family. And I think then maybe there's an important point here, and that is that when Jesus comes to connect and to bring wholeness, not only health and well-being to the individual, but by the end of this passage, Jesus is talking about wholeness in relationships with each other. And so one of the important things that Jesus does in addition to healing our relationship with God is Jesus also provides for us Jesus provides that which is going to help us heal our relationships with one another. And so rather than focusing so much on how divided we are, how divided we seem to be, in our own part of our communities and our families and our churches and our own corner of the world, maybe what we need is to ask for Jesus to provide for us what we need to connect with one another. Because that's what Jesus is focused on, healing relationships in addition to healing us spiritually. Because we are brothers and sisters and mothers. Jesus makes us family. And part of being family is trying to figure out ways that we can connect with each other, and that has to be intentional. We're going to have to make an effort to do that. And maybe it would be better if we made more of an effort and put more time and attention on how we do that and focus less on how divided we think we are, or trying to feel more divided from each other. So, division, connection. Those are my thoughts on this passage for this week. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, so please share them in the comments either on YouTube or on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lord of Life YouTube channel, and thank you for watching. God bless.